There's no denying it that One Punch Man Season 3 is probably one of the most awaited anime seasons in the past few years or so. But what is most interesting is that we still don't know anything about it. Yes, literally, besides the anime itself being announced, we don't know anything else. We do not know the studio, the release date, or even the staff that is going to work on it. It's been almost a year since its announcement, and even though we've barely been revealed stuff, there are some hints here and there that sort of point towards which studio is probably gonna take on this project. So in this video, I'm going to go over all of the studios that are most likely to animate the third season, and I'll also be giving them a percentage rating, signifying the chance they hold in adapting the series. Make sure you stay until the end because I have a really special pick that I don't think anyone expects. But before we get into it, make sure you subscribe as that helps the channel a lot more than you think. Now without further ado, let's get straight into the video. First things first, on the 1st of January, we got a crazy announcement from Yusuke Murata himself, and if you didn't know, he's the person who does the art for the manga and is also the original character designer for the anime. And I personally think he's one of the best in the game. So if you haven't heard of him, you should definitely check some of his works out because his drawings are amazing. Anyways, he recently revealed that he created his own animation studio called Village Studio, and that he's currently working on his first small project, probably an anime, and he calls it a pilot film. Now, taking all of this into account, I doubt he's talking about One Punch Man here. I mean, the whole franchise itself is one of the biggest ever, and this third season is probably one of the biggest projects and challenges to take on, even for the biggest of studios. So I really doubt that this small studio that he just created is going to do something about it. But it is nice to see, you can't lie, that he's getting into the anime industry finally, and also he's a very talented artist, so I can't wait to see what he does in the future. The probability of Village Studio taking on One Punch Man Season 3 is 4%. And yes, it's not as big as some people might expect, but I guess there is a chance there for a big surprise. Moving on, we have one of the best contenders. Everyone, and I mean everyone, is obsessed with this studio. Even people who are not even passionate about anime that much know this studio or have heard of it. And yes, I'm talking about MAPPA. Listen, people like to think that MAPPA just accepts everything there is on the market, and while that is kind of stupid because it's actually the production company that does it and not the studio itself, I do think there are some hints here that point towards MAPPA being involved in this next season of One Punch Man. And my first point is that they're the most capable. I mean, let's be real here, they have one of the biggest teams in the industry and they're currently on their run of their lifetime. They just finished Attack on Titan as well, and almost everyone expects them to take just another big franchise on, like One Punch Man, and it seems probable that just might be their next challenge. And I think almost everyone believes MAPPA is going to take One Punch Man. I think that makes the most sense for the general consensus. And also, if you look at how MAPPA markets its anime, they have done this before. And what I mean is announcing the anime without the animation studio being revealed. And they legit have done this before. I mean, they did this with Villain Saga Season 2 just a year ago. It was announced very early on with just a key visual, but we didn't know who was animating it or when it was going to be released. And the same exact thing is happening right now with the third season of One Punch Man. Now, even if everything is pointing towards MAPPA, I think everyone is just accepting that as a fact right now. I do think another studio is more likely to take their spot, but I'm going to talk about them a bit later. That being said, MAPPA gets a 30% rating. The only thing that sort of holds me back from giving it a higher chance is the unannounced staff and also the insane schedule they have for the next few years. I mean, they are absolutely stacked with anime projects, so I'm not sure how they might make space for this big of a giant in the industry. Now, next up, we have Madhouse. And with Madhouse, it's a little bit tricky because they have done season 1, which is probably one of the best seasons of anime in my opinion. But to be fair, at that time, they also had a huge staff with a lot of talented people. Now, I'm not saying that now they're not as talented, but back then they were much bigger and they were delivering with these passion projects. I'm not going to lie though, them returning to make season 3 would be an absolute joy to witness, but I really don't think that's the case now, since they're sort of over that phase of adapting mainstream media and mainstream anime, and they are so much more niche now. So Madhouse receives a 6% probability chance. It is still more probable than Village Studio, but not so much as MAPPA. JC staff is in a similar situation. They did season 2 and their continuation would just not make any sense in my opinion. If they were going to continue season 3, they would have just continued exactly after finishing finishing season 2. Look, this season is often hated on because it's a clear downgrade from the first season, but for me it was pretty solid. It clearly doesn't touch the highs of the first season by Madhouse, but they still tried and they sort of kept the consistency with some scenes. The Gato scene in specific by the end of the season was one of the best animation sequences to this day. And yes, you can see that they had some weird CG models, and I don't know if you remember, but they had those weird ass sound effects that were very loud. They were pretty fun, but I don't know why they made them so loud in the first place. Also, what I find interesting is that the title of each of these seasons are all different. So what does that mean? Does that mean that all of these will be produced from different studio companies? I'm not even sure if it means something, but the first season was marketed as One Punch Man, the second season was called One Punch Man second season, and now we have One Punch Man 3. I just find it a bit odd how each of these are marketed differently, but yeah, the second season received a lot of hate, so I think that's a big part of why I don't think there's a chance for JC staff to make a comeback. So this gets a 15% probability from me, still up there, but I don't think it's enough. And now to finish things off, the last studio that I also think has the biggest probability of adapting the latest season of One Punch Man is none other than David Production. I truly believe that the studio would do a more than great job at adapting the third season, but to start off, they are a huge anime production with a ton of employees, and not that many projects were announced recently. Currently, they work on Undead Unluck, which is currently airing right now, and the only other anime really is the second season of Urusei Yatsura, but that's pretty much it. Not to mention that they just finished adapting the whole of JoJo, and I say the whole of JoJo because the series director recently said in an interview how they originally planned to adapt everything up until part 6, which kind of makes a lot of sense because that's the first conclusion of the story. While I do think they're going to eventually adapt part 7, 8, and 9, I don't think they're going to do it in the next few years, that's for sure. So that just means that they have more time to spend on another anime, maybe another franchise. Now, why would such a big studio company like David Production have only one project announced in production right now? It just doesn't make much sense. Now, remember when I talked about the sound effects being a bit different but fitting in the second season? Which other studio is very well known for their own sound effects? David's Production, that's right. And how fitting it would be for JC staff to pass on the torch to someone like David Production, who are used to adapting this type of combat heavy stories. So taking everything I've talked about so far, this gets a 45% chance of adapting One Punch Man season 3. You can call it bias, you can call it whatever you want, but I genuinely think this will get adapted by David Productions. It just makes sense in my head. Of course, I might be wrong, but I'm pretty confident about this. I feel like once you see the vision, you'd know that David Production would do a great job in adapting this. But now it's your time to let me know in the comments below on your thoughts. Who do you think is going to adapt this? Who do you want to adapt this next season of One Punch Man? And do you agree with the percentages that I gave? This was it for this video. Like if you enjoyed, dislike if you haven't, and see you guys next time. Peace.